Hey guys, welcome to today's build where we're going to be going through a full in-depth review of the Winter Grasp build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place some footage in the bottom right hand side of the screen as we go through this video guys, but what I like to do now is what I call like a build showcase where we'll quickly run through the Ascended map. You can see the build in action at the highest tier that I've unlocked. Obviously we've only got 4 more tiers left and that's end game completely complete, but you'll see how fast it shreds through the game. What I would say is I tend to do maybe 2-3 rifts and then I log out and log back in because the game just crashes. You'll see in the clips coming up where the game just stutters and it just cannot handle the amount of spells. Not on my end, but it's on the game's end, so I find just logging out every couple of dungeons um, really helps with that. So the start of the dungeon when you get in, as you can see, we've got no rage. The way I like to do it is to get off to a fast start is we'll cast Aether Jump and Bulwark just to get some rage generation so we can instantly cast Dusk Shroud and get that movement speed increase and just start getting around the map. So I'm going to shut up for a few seconds and let you see what it looks like. So something you want to be looking at as you're going around the map. Still slightly getting used to the damage now that we've moved up a tier or so. Things don't die as fast as they did in previous tiers. You want to look for the weakest enemy, mark it like so, and then burst them down and watch them marks spread. And you'll see the mark spreads around and they all just die. Obviously, like I said, you want to look for the weakest enemy, but I go ahead and mark the sort of lieutenants, if you will. But you can see by all the ailments on the floor how there's still a potential to be one shot because it covers so much of the screen that you just can't see what's happening. Sometimes I don't know if I've stepped in something or I've just been caught in one shot, but when you get to the bosses and there's so much stuff on the floor, it's really hard to see those ailment effects and you do die. As you can see, as we're inflicting these ailments, we get the increased damage from the ailments that we're inflicting. Still looking at a way to try and increase the amount of ailments damage that we get on it. So you'll see we'll get hopefully some sacred damage on soon and just increase that damage a little bit more. Just keep an eye on the bottom corner. You'll see like a little sort of yellow flame come up, and that's the sacred damage proc. So there's the fire one that's just come on. But we may have to look at increasing the amount of ailments that we can stack just to get them all on. Aether and Shadow will always be there, but it'll flick between fire and sacred. As you can see, that bar's ticking up nicely. I would like to say it's ticking up a lot faster if I wasn't talking. It's actually quite hard to commentate and talk on what you're doing at the same time. You'll see us using Dusk Shroud to passively just get around the map, and also it increases our shadow damage when we leave the cloud, which is these little buffs down this side of the map. And again, Bulwark is on just to keep that heal going and a little bit extra damage. It's handy to have that heal on all the time because, like I say, when you do get to a lieutenant or a boss, you cannot really see what's happening on the screen. I do find that these guys do actually. Let's see if we can do it without dying. These guys do hurt quite a lot, and they will kill you. There's that little bit of stutter lag. take some of them. If you just cast your eye down to the willpower as well, you'll see that proc come through. There you go, see it? The transfer time as well really kicks in. This is without me using any potions for willpower. It's just proc the heal, drop full stacks, run away, watch him die. Easy as that, guys. So, skill setup, stat allocation. There'll be no prizes for guessing the stat allocation, which is full ferocity. That's basically just to get the spell critical chance score. We'll naturally get toughness through our kit along with some wisdom, but we're not going to spend any points in there. Just full spell critical strike score for as much damage as we can pump out. Start at the top with Aetherstorm, working our way from down the bottom here. Very basic generic setup. Everything is around reducing the willpower cost, increased teleport range, damage to enemies which inflict a status, which is what we're aiming for with the Aether damage on the build. Moving on, more range, reduce cooldown, cast skill removes crowd control effect, which is very good for getting out of sticky situations. Increase movement speed after completing the teleport, just to clear that map a little bit faster. And willpower for each enemy pass through, which is also very handy for keeping the willpower up, especially if you're stacking your mobs together. You can just teleport through a lot of them, get some willpower back, give you an extra cast or so on your Winter's Grasp. Next skill up we have, moving down, Bulwark of Dawn. Again, the main part of the skill is this one here. Healing area follows the player when it's cast on. Basically just casting a heal on yourself. As you can see, we're not running any HP potions, so we rely on this to follow around and heal. So it's pretty optimal to keep this up all the time to keep the heal ticking over. Alongside it is resistance in the area, just to give a bit more survivability. Increased duration, cooldown, skill duration, damage, just because we've got 1 point left over. I prefer a little bit extra damage. It just helps kill the bosses a little bit quicker, kill the enemies a little bit faster, and then a little bit more healing rate. If you want to do, you could sub out the damage for more regeneration or reduce willpower cost, but I prefer the damage. That's what I stick with. So third up on the list is Dusk Shroud. So this one grants us invisibility when we cast it, but we're using 3 parts to this spell. We're using it for the movement speed increase that you can get, the survivability increase that you get, and also to buff our damage of Winter Grasp, which is very important. So bear that in mind as we go through the next couple of skills and how they tie together and just increase that damage a little bit more. So first node is for dodge chance, just to give us that survivability we talked about before. Second node is the increased shadow damage after dropping the smoke cloud, which you can use to buff your Winter's Grasp casts. Shadow Cloud break CC again, same as we covered in Aether Jump, it just gives you an extra break of CC should you need it. Move through enemies while invisible, which is quite handy for map clearing and also trying to get out of a sticky situation. Increased movement speed after dropping the Shadow Cloud again, increased clear speed, and you can just pretty much use it at the start of the dungeon to get yourself off and going into the map and just clear it as fast as you can. And reduce rage cost, which is very important because it's if you're managing your resources well, it's very hard to get a lot of rage in this build to be able to cast, say, a Dusk Shroud and a Mark of Impurity together. Sometimes I do consider thinking, should I be taking a rage potion? But then I can run a few maps and think I don't need it. There's just certain times where if you're not managing your resources properly, you will run into a few rage issues with this build, but that's only if you're playing suboptimally. So fourth on the list, guys, Mark of Impurity. So this is a slightly different skill setup to what I was using in a few previous videos. Some of the newer videos you'll see that I am using this node here, which is spreads to the surrounding enemies on death of a target. So the way that I've been using this is to target the weakest enemy in the crowd, kill it, spread the debuff on everyone else, and that has that ripple effect where things just start dying, especially alongside this node here where enemies under 10% die instantly when hit. Because we're leaving that status effect on the floor, they'll just keep taking damage, they'll get the 10% HP and it'll just execute them. So these two together are really, really strong and do really increase the clear speed through the expeditions, which allows you to get to the boss faster and just move on through the tiers or just move on to the next map if you're just farming. Alongside these two, I am running marked enemies are more vulnerable to damage just to increase our DPS. Increased critical damage on marked targets, again increasing DPS. Marked targets are more vulnerable, again DPS. And marked targets more vulnerable, again DPS. So you can see with this it's very, very damage orientated, very, very focused on clearing and killing packs as fast as you can. I did originally, like I said, wasn't running this node and I was running with a few other, so it has longer duration, reduced cooldown and things like that, but 0.9 it's less than a second. It's not really worth it. This node is far, far superior. Fifth skill in the setup is Juggernaut. Quite a few nodes in here to reduce our damage taken and some CC. So if we quickly go through them, we have grants rage when receiving damage, which helps to generate a little bit extra rage to cast Mark of Impurity and Dusk Shroud should we need it. Inflicts a portion of weapon damage back on the attackers. Reduce damage from projectiles, cooldown, rage cost, maximum absorption, increased shield absorption, and grants immunity crowd control. Again, just going back to what we said before, it's just all about survivability on that skill and a little bit reduced rage cost and generation at the same time, just to help manage them resources a little bit better. So, sixth and final skill, probably the biggest part we'll cover in this section. Moving on down the list, you may be wondering why I've got so many skills. It's actually an achievement in the game to unlock all the skills, but because of the flexibility with champions, it is benefit to learn all the skills and then you can just level them up rather than leveling up a new character. So, Winter's Grasp, we are using a shadow version of this skill, which is why we've took this node here. It converts our frost damage to shadow, which was why I said in the Dusk Shroud segment about we can use that that buff to increase our shadow damage on demand should we need it, and also use it as a survivability tool. We also will be running Ice Pawn to reduce the cooldown, increased area effect, and permafrost to leave the damaging area on the floor. Now, because I have skill level 87, I can run increased damage and increased damage. To get this build working at a minimum, the skill needs to be level 62 and you will need to take this node here for reduced cooldown and this node here to make it instant cast. When you get the skill to level 82, you can drop this skill here and get 2 more points to place in increased damage, or if you want to, you can take crit. I personally prefer the increased base damage. So, like I said, level 62, skill node 2, and skill node 16. If it's over 82, you can take it away and add in some more damage to the build. So guys, at the big part of the video, going through our Gates of Fate, or as most people will call it, the passive skill tree. As you can see, we've took a little bit from every section of the tree. We just dive in, take a few nodes, and then drop out into another section. A lot of this revolves around ailments, stacking ailments, and survivability. Now there is, like I said, different ways that you can go through some of these paths. You might see different builds with different variations. It just depends on how you're set up, what your items are like, and what you actually prefer playing with. And this at the minute is the most enjoyable one for me. I am thinking about playing around a little bit more over this side with some of the nodes, maybe dropping a few and changing a few, but we'll cover that when we get to it. So starting off, you want to path through the crit hit damage over to this node here. Attacks and spells are more likely to be critical hit, just to increase our damage. And then we path up into here and take increased attack speed score. It's just a node that we have to take to get to what we want, which is the increased critical hit damage back over this side, movement speed, which is good for us, cast speed score, which is good for us, and then all the way up the top here to deal more damage when only one enemy is nearby. So this works quite well for bosses, which you'll see in the videos that I've posted before. Shreds through the bosses, and this is because this procs 25% more damage when there's only one enemy within 7 meters of the boss, or with yourself, sorry. Then we'll path right along here and we'll take this. Just a preference for me is you can dodge through enemies, which is just a quality of life improvement for me. Moving on up over into the Abyssal Shaper node, we path through status ailment chance, occult damage, damage, and then we take this node here, which occult damage is increased for 5% for every cursed stack an enemy has. Again, just stacking more damage, and the node above it just increases the damage by a further 2%. Moving on over this way towards the cobalt section of the tree. We split the tree, and this is probably the one we'll spend the most time in because it gives us the most benefits to this build. This right side here is status ailment chance scores and maximum stacks of ailments, which is good for us. We'll be stacking as many as we possibly can. Over to the left side, it's ailment duration and spell damage, which unlocks this node here. Killing an enemy afflicted with ailments gives us a temporary damage boost. So because we are stacking some aether damage and it's a shadow version, we will have lots of ailments on the enemies, and then when we're killing them, we get 5% damage for each ailment stack on that enemy. Again, increasing our DPS by a substantial amount. Coming right the way around here to take the power of the first men. This gives us a 50% chance to multiply the number of ailment stacks inflicted by 2. Again, increasing our damage. And then we path back on ourselves over here to take Grievous Afflictions, which you can now apply 1 additional ailment. After that, we move down here for some survivability over this end of the tree. Maximum health regen, all resists and max health. This block efficiency is something we just have to take. Resistance score, and then this node here is very important when you see the items and the way we try to build with survivability. So basically we get a bonus depending on what type of chest piece we equip. We'll be equipping a heavy chest piece so that we get the all resistance score equivalent to the resist score on the chest piece. So we'll be looking for items with a high resistance score on the chest piece that are a heavy type of armor to increase our survivability, and you'll see when we get onto the item section of the build just how much survivability this node does give you. And the one off just to the side here applies the same gain but to the head slot as well, and again we'll be taking the all resistant score node by using the heavy helmet. This just gives us an insane amount of resistances and really does increase the survivability when you get up into the higher tier of the ascended expeditions. Over this side, it's just some more crit hit damage, max health, and resistances. We do take a slight move through the Warbreaker tree, or Warmonger rather. We get some ferocity for the crit damage, and then we take the global life leech, just heals you on the next tick of regen. Stopping by over this way to take some increased elemental damage and elementary destabilization. A lot of people ask how I maintain my willpower to be so high. This is because of this procs, and it procs quite often. I personally think that this may proc more than what the tooltip says, because it says here when you're below 30% willpower, you have a chance to cause an explosion dealing damage based on your maximum force shield or health. It regenerates 20% of your willpower and has a cooldown of 5 seconds. Now, I am running an insanely large amount of regeneration, or transfer time between willpower and rage, so that does help. But this does proc quite a lot, and I personally think that this node possibly is broken at the moment. So we'll look out for that in future patches, because it does seem to proc more than every 5 seconds. Again, in this part of the tree is just willpower and transfer time between willpower and rage. Stopping by through this tree here just literally to get the pattern up over here. This one we covered at the start of the section, increased willpower and rage, and again another point there for willpower and rage. Pathing off to the right here for this passive node here, which is branded burst, gives you a tenon point for every 2.5 seconds up to a maximum of 5 tenon points, and a tenon point is consumed whenever you're hit. It's just a 50% flat damage reduction per tenon point, so it just gives again survivability, survivability, survivability. Pathing on up here to the section where I'm thinking of changing a little bit. Up here we have increased aether damage, Stilton chance, dodge score, and a little bit force shield, so very, very good for what we want. Aether damage, dodge chance, force shield, more aether damage, and then this node here, time, which time cannot heal. When you damage an enemy that's inflicted with status, it will take the damage again after a few seconds. When you hit enemies with afflicted status, they take 100% of the damage hit again after a 1.5 second delay. So enemies will be affected by status, because we've got shadow status going on. We've also got the aether damage, which inflicts a status as well. What happens with that is you'll see the Winter's Grasp on the floor. They'll take the damage, and then because they're inflicted with a status, they'll take 100% of the damage again after a 1.5 second delay. That's why you see all them numbers just going up and up and up and up on the screen, is because that's stacking damage. They get the initial burst, and then they get the stack damage as well, which is what melts through the enemies in the dungeons. Over this way we have Dire Juncture. It just reduces the amount of damage that we take. It's like it separates the damage, so you'll take 40% of the damage, and then after one more second you'll take it again. I don't know how good this is, because I take damage and it gives us time to heal, but then I still get one shot sometimes. So I'm still testing out whether or not having this node saves us more than I know, or whether they just don't do enough damage to kill us. So instead of losing a quarter HP, I might just lose half my HP. I don't know if it's worth keeping that. I've used it since the start, and I have had quite a lot of survivability, so I might do some testing with that, and I'll come back to you guys. And the node just beyond it here just increases your maximum, respectively, for the penalty to this. So instead of having 85%, it would be 90% of your maximum HP in force field. That pretty much sums up the Gates of Fate section of the video, guys. With the next few points that I will be getting, I am going to play around, like I say, with maybe taking an extra willpower, because that'll give us a couple of extra casts of Winter's Grasp before we run out of willpower. And then after that, I haven't really thought about where we're going to go. Possibly around the top here to look at getting some more crit hit damage from the Praetorian tree, because I believe this one is as well. Oh, that's ferocity, so crit hit damage and ferocity could always be an option. We don't really want any health regeneration, so probably by the time we hit 80, we would have took some more willpower and rage, the crit hit damage, and then probably the ferocity. After that, we'll have to have a little test and play around, because I'm not sure there's any more really essential nodes that we haven't already got within the build. It'll just be a little bit of min-maxing and tweaking for more survivability or more damage should we have enough survivability. Welcome to the final part of the video, guys. Thanks for hanging in there. If you've made it this far, please drop a like on the video, drop a comment down below, tell us what you've enjoyed about the video, what you enjoy about the build, any feedback, anything you'd like to see in the future with these types of videos. And thanks for hanging in there. You can nearly get into the game, test this out for yourselves, and see how good it feels. So, stat priorities appearing on the screen. Chest and helm have to be heavy with good resistance scores to make use of the Siegebreaker passive that we discussed in part 2. Health, resistance and toughness, rage and willpower reduction, transfer time on gems as much as possible, crit chance and or crit damage, and then flat aether damage to spells. So following on from what we're saying there, heavy slot for chest and head. This head isn't my usual one at the minute. I've got my main helm in the dark market, increasing the rarity on it, hoping to roll it with 2 additional stats from a rare item into a legendary, 2 additional good stats on the 3 that it's already got. I can't remember if it was 3 really good or 4 really good stats, but I put that in there hoping to get like a really sort of banging item. That'll be out soon, and I'll give you guys an update of how that turned out. But the reason that would take the high resistance scores is for the Siegebreaker passive, as discussed in part 2, and that's because the pretty much doubles the bonus that you get. So if we take this off and this off, our resistances aren't that great. Now you see if we add the 140 on, it actually increases it by a lot more. And again, obviously the more you have, the more it goes up, and this can like go up exponentially, especially if you get really high rolls on this or this score on this item. So we only got 86% here. If you check it via a third party website, I believe it goes 100% plus. So you can get some insane resists out of these kind of items. And if we drop that one on, you'll see that we jump all the way up to just over 5,000. So now for the rest of the items, now that we understand the reason behind the Siegebreaker that we are using to increase our defenses, you'll see a lot of similarities through these items, that they have rage and willpower cost reduction and all those things that we discussed before. However, my items aren't perfect and they're not fully optimized. We're still farming for these items and trying to hit the big rolls with as many possible affixes as we can that benefit our build. Like I say, farming above that 151 tier really is where you want to be to get them items. A lot of things you'll see on my items as I hover over them, some of them really do make a big difference, but then the likes of this item here has got agility on, which makes no difference to our build. Health regeneration, these are all things that I'll be looking to either remove by using the eternal regions that you collect, or by just getting a complete new upgrade from farming those expeditions, or hitting it lucky with an upgrade using the dark market or a dark market reward. Status ailment as chance score is something that we didn't cover a couple of minutes ago, and that's quite important as well because it does increase the chance for us to inflict those ailments. So the faster we inflict them ailments, the faster we increase with damage, and the faster that we just increase our DPS throughout the rest of the map.